Uh, Welcome all of you for this evening's meeting of Talking Films Online. We have Dr. Parichay Patra, who teaches film studies at IIT Jodhpur. He teaches in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences. I'll read out from his bio, but it's, I think he shared a very modest kind of bio, because I know him to be a very, very, widely read scholar of cinema, and also in the last few years, a widely published scholar as well. So his research interests are, include transnational cinema, cinematic waves in the post-1968 world, Indian New Wave of 1970s. His most recent publication includes a co-edited volume on Love Diaz, Evolution of a Filipino Auteur. He has a host of single-authored as well as co-edited books, also articles in international journals and books to his credit. The way we are acquainted with each other is after his master's in Jadavpur University, he came to English and Foreign Languages University, our department, for his PhD. But in the meanwhile, he got into Monash University. So he left for Australia and did his PhD over there, and now he's back. He was teaching in the BITS Pilani Goa campus before he joined IIT Jodhpur. The interesting thing about Parichay is not that he is just acquainted with Bengali cinema. We've had very interesting conversations on South Indian cinema as well, particularly New Wave South Indian cinema. And even more interesting, he reads and writes Tamil, Malayalam. He has done courses in these languages. So it's very, very, we're very happy, fortunate to have a young, well-read scholar, passionate about cinema. And he'll also probably explain to us why he wanted us, this group, to watch Ghatak. When I asked him, what would you recommend for us, he said Ghatak and nothing else. So over to you, Parichay. Welcome once again to our Talking Films Online group.
Thanks very much, Professor Nikhila, for those kind words of introduction. And it's a rare opportunity for me to kind of engage with you and Professor Tarokeshwar after a year since we met here in Jodhpur. And as you just mentioned in your introductory remarks, our acquaintance started at least a decade back in 2011, when I was a student in FLU and I did your research methodology course. I was in the system department in film studies. I started my PhD, stayed there just for a little while, for a semester to be honest, before I left for Australia. But my association with FLU and the department remained strong. Sorry. And when Professor Nikhila came up with this suggestion of organizing not really a film screening, but something a little different than that, than the usual screening and introduction to a screening. So I didn't know about this initiative. It's a wonderful initiative. This Facebook group where you have film researchers from other disciplines. Professor Tarokeshwar is from translation studies, for instance, and there may be several others. And then, people who are located abroad at the moment, Dr. Sanghita Sen, for instance. So coming together, watching a film and discussing it, watching it over the week, and then having a proper discussion session is a wonderful idea, especially since in India, we don't have a cinematheque, right? So for instance, Sanghita, she lives in Scotland, and they have their Dundee Art Center, which is nearby. They organized a complete retrospective of Hrithik Ghatak a few years back, which Sangeeta ji curated and co-organized, I think. So all over Europe and in the UK, in the US, you have such cinematheques and local art centers, art museums where they organize a lot of stuff. Here in India, we don't have that opportunity, don't have that kind of a space. And our age-old film society movement, it's no longer there. When I started engaging with film society back in Calcutta in the days of say back in early 2000s, to be honest, 2003-4, it was already in decline. So we no longer have this space for discussion outside the university. Film studies is a very university discipline, but what happens outside the university space? And most of the film critics in the pre-film studies days, they came from these backgrounds. So we need this space. And that is one of the reasons why I strongly recommended a Ghatak film, to be honest. Ghatak always, not only because Ghatak is perhaps one of the most, if not the most, arguably the most significant filmmaker that India has ever produced. And most of our Indian new wave filmmakers like Mani Kaul and Kumar Sahani and Arul Gopalakrishnan and John Abraham, they studied under his tutelage at Pune FTII. So he inspired all of them. Sahani and others wrote extensively on their teacher. So apart from all that, his pedagogic influence and his aesthetic appeal of his cinema, his cinematic canon, apart from that, Ghatak is also a very enigmatic and ambiguous figure. The film society critics very often misread his works, critiqued him rather harshly for not being true to his once communist self. So Ghatak was criticized for relying rather heavily on C.J. Jung, Carl Gustav Jung, and his psychoanalysis. Especially, he was inspired by Jung's idea of the totem, the great mother archetype, and several other things. I'm not going into the details, but obviously, so mostly Bengali left-leaning film society critics like Shomik Bandyopadhyay and several others critiqued Ghatak because of this, and also for some, anecdotal stuff such as his personal association with Indira Gandhi. Ghatak was making a non-fictional work on Indira Gandhi's life, which was not completed. So because of all that, he was criticized. And Bari Thekey Paliye, again, I wanted to talk about this film for two particular reasons. Firstly, it's not very well discussed. Unlike his so-called partition trilogy, which many of you know about, Meghe Dhaka Tara, or the Cloud-Capped Star, Komal Gandhar, known as E-flat, and Subarna Rekha, or the Golden Line, this so-called partition trilogy, because I believe that his cinema goes well beyond the historical event of the Indian partition, but I'll come to that later. So Bari Thekey Paliye is not very, like most of his films in his lifetime, it was not very well received. The copy that I have shared with all of you is an NFAI restored copy, and our own Sangeeta Di, Dr. Sangeeta Sen, subtitled it. We should thank her for the wonderful subtitles that it has. And it was screened very recently in the US. Moinak Bishwas, the film studies scholar from Jadavpur, was serving as the Fulbright Nehru Fellow in Columbia University, and Gayatri Spivak was the host. So Gayatri Spivak and Moinak, they jointly organized screening of Hrithik Ghatak's films in New York, and this this new kind of remastered version of Bari Thekey Paliye, freshly subtitled version, was screened there. So now, if you are familiar with Hrithik Ghatak and his concerns, you perhaps many of you may know about his partition trilogy and his tumultuous life, alcoholism, and other stuff. Bari Thekey Paliye, or alternative, it's known by its alternative English title, The Runaway, his third film, his debut, Nagorik, or The Citizen, was not released in his lifetime, made in 1951. One of the earliest quote-unquote neorealist work in India. It was followed by Ajantrik, known by its alternative English title, Pathetic Fallacy, and then Bari Thekey Paliye. None of these were commercially successful. Like most of his films, except for The Cloud Cat Star, his films were not successful. But before I talk about the film, this particular film, I would also like to introduce Shivaram Chakraborty, the Bengali humorist and a major literary figure on whose novel this film is based. So Shivaram Chakraborty, or as he used to pronounce his name, Shibram Chakraborty, a great master of punning and one of the greatest Bengali humorists of last century, had a very tumultuous life. He came from an impoverished, formerly feudal royal family, but lived the life of a nomad and engaged actively with anti-colonial movements, engaged with people like Chittaranjan Das and Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, kind of served prison terms under the colonial administration, literally lived on the streets, and later went on to become a great humorist. But he also tried his hands at many other literary genres, including novel, play, poems. He dramatized Sharat Chandra's novels, wrote a very important political treatise on Gandhian philosophy and Marxism. And this particular work, Bari Thekey Paliye, the literary text has the same name, the same title, The Runaway, in English. It was he started serializing it. He started it as a fiction for young adults. Sorry, he started serializing it in the title of Palatak in a magazine called Mouchak back in 1937, and it included several references to anti-colonial Swadeshi movements in Bengal, including the prison life of anti-colonial protesters. And then it was serialized in another Bengali periodical called Ramdhanu. Finally, it was published in book form in 1937, and it had several references to, so in the book form, it omitted that prison reference to avoid censorship, but it had other political references like Gandhian movements and Swadeshi movements, Swarajya party, and other several political happenings in British India. Now it is really very significant for a reason. Even though Shivaram Chakraborty shifted to a very different domain later, when Hrithik Ghatak, after many years in the 1960s, late 50s, to be honest, wanted to adapt it for screen, Ghatak shifted it to a very, very different age. He contemporized it. So, as you can see in the film, it doesn't have references to the anti-colonial movements and the colonial administration, things that feature in Shivaram Chakraborty's original novel published in 1937, 10 years before the independence. Here, Ghatak is concerned much more with the post-independence India and the betrayal, the idea of betrayal, not only in terms of politics, but the aesthetic betrayal that pervades his cinematic canon. So I'll just refer to some of his persistent thematic motifs and traits that can be found in his better known works as well, things that are hinted at in this film. So, and I was going through Moinak Vishwas's doctoral dissertation, which he submitted back in 2003 at Monash University so I just have it in front of me, where he refers to, there's a chapter, it was on the many realisms, historical realism and Indian cinema. and I can't recall the exact title right now, but there's a specific chapter on Hrithik Ghatak, an abridged version of which was published in an Australian film journal called Rouge, Rouge. You can find it online, and that article is called Her Mother's Son. So there Ghatak, refers to Bari Thekey Paliye and about its fairy tale-like structure. So, and whenever we talk about the fairy tale, we can recall our Vladimir Trop, right? Morphology of the folktale, how folktale is constructed around the world. Its several traits and features and motifs that are common, that are predominant in every tradition. So Trop focused on the Eastern European, Russian folktale. But such traits can be found elsewhere. So here you have the runaway son and his adventure, his fantasy adventure. So there are several fantasy sequences. And he comes back. The prodigal runaway son's return happens at the end of the film. And there's the idea of the princess who must be won from the clutches of the cruel king or the demon, whatever. Here you have such a princess in the form of the girl Kanchan befriends in Calcutta, but also in the figure of Kanchan's mother, who is waiting for his return. And Kanchan is supposed to bring a lot of luxurious items for his mother. So that fairy tale structure is followed here, because it is structured like that. But Ghatak carefully inserts, throughout the text, he inserts his aesthetic political concerns here and there. So I can just refer to a few things. Think of this salesman character played by Kali Banerjee with his long beards and his uncanny appearance. He befriends all the kids, small boys and girls, little boys and girls, and sells his snacks. Now Kali Banerjee has lost his mother and they never meet in the film. And we encounter this old woman who is tortured by the mob. So there's a very pertinent mob lynching sequence in Bari Thekey Paliye. I think it's way more relevant in our context at the moment. And that old woman, Kanchan, just tries to save her, throws himself amidst the murderous mob and says, she does not steal, she is my mother. So she perhaps be the lost mother of the salesman. And she talks about her lost son, and she is looking for the lost son. So this idea of the lost mother and son, the loss of kinship, the loss of family ties and genealogy, to be more specific, and this sudden appearance of the mother, reappearance of the mother, using a rather violent means. You can find that in Subarnarekha. So this is what Ghatak hints at in this film. And it becomes way more matured, way more, it becomes sharper in Subarnarekha. So if you watch his Subarnarekha, the Golden Lion, there too, the lower caste boy gets separated from his mother after partition. And he recognizes his mother long back in the middle of the film. And that's how his caste identity becomes revealed, that he is a lower caste, and he becomes ostracized. So this might be a very common quote-unquote melodramatic trait in Indian popular cinema. You find that very often, that Hrithik Ghatak just playfully picks up his elements from the popular and turns it upside down. So for instance, in Subarnarekha, the foundling that I was talking about, the lost child, and his mother, his dying mother is found, and there's a moment of recognition, recognizing the mother and his caste identity. So the foundling, all of a sudden, he becomes a lower caste person. In a popular film, it would have happened very differently. Think of Raj Kapoor's Awara, where the foundling in the newly independent India, at the end of the film, he is revealed to be the son of the judge. And apart from this revelation, this recognition, and this violence that characterizes a city, think of the way Ghatak looks at the kaleidoscope of Calcutta throughout the film. So this idea of engaging with the city and its din and bustle and its cruelty, which is somehow part of its modernity, it has always been there in Indian cinema, especially in the 50s. So I'm reminded of something like, and things that were happening in Bombay cinema in the 50s. The very well-known song, Ye Hai Mumbai Meri Jaan. The recognition of the city as a turbulent space where you have to make many compromises to survive, to float. And Sudipto Koviraj's very well-known article on that, which was published in a book called City Flicks. It's called Reading a Song of the City, where Koviraj talks about this new urbanity, the kind of promises that it offers to the newly independent Indian, something that the song harbors. So the despair and the sense of doom, but also some kind of optimism. Here in Bari Thekey Paliye, you may find the city extremely cruel, and Ghatak will go on with that cruel depiction of the city. He started it with his debut film Nagorik, and he continued with it, especially in the film that followed, The Cloud Cat Star. So this idea of the turbulent, cruel city, the inhumanity of a specific kind of urbanity is very much there. But, and this will be my last point before I open it for discussion, and this is what Moinar বিশ্বাস points out specifically in his works, that you cannot categorize Ghatak as a nativist. He is not talking about a return to the lost plenitude, even though the return takes place at the end of the film, but the return doesn't occupy much space in it. The boy returns to the village. It's not because the journey from the country to the city is a pre-given in Ghatak. It's not. It's just part of the fairy tale-like structure that he's kind of adapting here. But instead, he focuses much more on the problematic nature of Indian urbanity post-independence. So Ghatak has always been fascinated by the idea of some kind of a return to, sorry, the country that is lost. And you can find that those references everywhere in this film as well. So the salesman figure who sells snacks, he's also from East Pakistan, which is now Bangladesh. And the Baul figure who sings a song on the city, he also refers to what he lost in the erstwhile East Pakistan. So there's this mode of return in his consciousness, and he is using melodrama as a form. So there's a lot of discussion on that after film studies came in, how melodrama originated at the same time with realism in the 19th century, and how not only Ghatak but several others, even quote-unquote realists, used several melodramatic traits deliberately to create some kind of an epic cinema. That is always there. So in this film, you can find these three particular and significant traits that kind of concerns me. Firstly, the way Ghatak shifts it from the Shibramian pre-independence, anti-colonial past to the post-independence urbanity. Secondly, his engagement with certain kind of urban experience. And thirdly, this idea of return, which is always problematized, because return to the roots is not possible. It's the impossible that Ghatak highlights rather deliberately. And you will find the city becoming way more, devastating, selfish, and at the time, kind of murderous in the next film. Sorry, Meghitakatara. So that's it. I just wanted to initiate the discussion with these traits. Sorry for taking a lot of time. So it's open for discussion
now. Anyone? Thanks, Parichay, for that overview. We'll keep coming back to you, as each one of us speaks as well. Yeah, anyone wants to come in at this point? No one is unmuting their mics. Okay, while people collect their thoughts, I have a couple of questions and points, Parichay, to ask you. Maybe you said this, but I missed. When was Shivram Chakravarti's book published?
In 1937.
37. Okay.
Yes.
Uh, and I mean, is there, just a second, is there an English translation of this?
No, I don't think it has been translated. Some
Okay.
of Shivaram, as I said, he went on to write, he became a humorist and wrote a lot of stories for young adults. Some of these are translated by Arunabhu Sinha and published from a publishing house in Delhi, but not this novel.
Okay. Couple of points that I found interesting about the film. I mean, of course, the film itself is wonderful, very interesting. Some people may say somewhat quaint, but also very contemporary in some ways in its sensibility. One very interesting aspect is, which you also, I think, mentioned in passing, is this aspect of kinship and whom you embrace as your own. So virtually anyone who is loving, so it's not necessarily bound by or restricted to the familial structure. In fact, the father is not loving, so it's like almost this is something that he finds as he moves from one moment to the other. Whoever is willing to embrace him, he's ready to make them their own, and so is it from the other end. So the others too are so easily taken in and taken up by him. So that was again very interesting. And the point that you made about the city too, the Kolkata that we see here, as the mother asks in the end, all those familiar monuments and landmarks that one would associate, that's not the Kolkata that we see here either. So, except probably for the Hooghly bridge, I don't think there was anything that we could recognize of Kolkata, and yet he's almost throughout the film on the streets. So in that sense, I thought this film was, very interesting. And you made this point again, this Oedipal preoccupation of Ghatak in passing. I too was thinking along those lines quite a bit while watching the film. The mother figure and the sense of, trying to replace in some ways the father, and all that the father can provide for or fails to provide for the mother. So I thought all those points were quite very, very interesting, and it's surprising, I mean, why this film has not been much discussed, or why it took so long to be restored, because it's such an interesting insight into the filmmaker, into Ghatak, I think. Yeah.
Because actually, yeah, these are really pertinent points that you have raised. Thanks for that, Professor Nikhila. Actually, this film was like many of his early works, like Nagorik and some of his non-fictional films. This film also was kind of eclipsed by his Partition trilogy, or Tita Sekti Nodhir Naam, and other more well-known films that he made later. So people wrote a lot on, webbed on, discussed films like Cloudcap Star and E Flat and The Golden Line, and because of the critical success of his later films, his early works were completely overshadowed, eclipsed. So that was one of the reasons. And his preoccupation with this unknown mode of urbanity and the kind of Calcutta which is not there. I mean, in the run-of-the-mill popular film, and it's part of, think of this portrayal of a very monochromatic city symphony kind of a film. So there are many experimental filmmakers in the West who kind of documented unknown cities, or the unknown faces of a known city. For instance, here Ghatak does something similar, and he will go on with it in Subarnarekha, so the Golden Line. There's a very elaborate sequence where these two, protagonists, they're engaging in their drunken revelry, and um, the man wants to go to a brothel, and he ends up at the doorstep of his sister, who is kind of who is about to become a prostitute uh, because of her impoverished existence. So, and in that sequence in Subarnarekha, so that this violent face of the city is it becomes he takes it to a whole new level by inserting the score from Federico Fellini's La Dolce Vita. So La Dolce Vita's soundtrack was inserted by Ghatak as a tribute to Fellini as well in that film, in that particular sequence. Because in La Dolce Vita, Fellini explored the dark face of Rome, the dark underbelly, to be honest, and the the futility of the Roman nobility, the Italian nobility in the post-war scenario. And Ghatak referred to that in Subarnarekha. So this alternative engagement, rather, as you have rightly pointed out, with the city is very much in his there in his works. So I just wanted to suggest that even though this is a much less discussed film, it has several, indications of things that were about to come.
I also think that, one of the reasons why Bari Theke Paliye was not discussed much, also because I think it was it was sandwiched between Ajantrik, because Ajantrik did receive some attention, and then it was released in 1959, and then 1960 brings the most box office successful film of Hrithik Ghatak ever in his life. So yeah, Meghe and then and also another reason why later on it could not be screened, because of the rights issue. Ajantrik and Bari Theke Paliye, the rights are with Pramod Lahiri's family. Pramod Lahiri was the producer of these two films, and when I did the retrospective here, I tried getting permission for these two films, because by that time Bari Theke Paliye was already restored, and I could not get the permission. They asked for a humongous fees to screen it, so obviously we had to let it go. And because it could not be screened due to these kinds of complications, it went out of public memory. So that is about why I mean this could be one of the reasons why it did not reach people. And the available DVD, that print was so horrible, and when we see this beautiful print, we know how amazing as a film it is. It's on so many levels, in terms of cinematography, in terms of editing, and the use of music particularly. So beautiful. I wanted to point out another thing, that is the idea of El Dorado. And
yes,
a kind of equation between Kolkata as El Dorado, like in Bangla we have a concept of Shob Pechir Desh. So it's almost like that,
Mrinal Sen, sorry to interrupt. Mrinal Sen made a non-fictional film called Calcutta My El Dorado.
Yes, I was coming to that. Yes, and Mrinal Sen in his interviews extensively called Kolkata his El Dorado, right? But I mean, Hrithik Ghatak did not use El Dorado in the same sense as Mrinal Sen did. He was actually critiquing that. He was critiquing that idea of Kolkata, in which there was this entire marginal population in India. All marginal men were placed somewhere, men and women and children. The communities, they were placed in the outskirts, in the colonies, so-called colonies, refugee colonies, and these were the people who were completely invisible, as if they did not exist. And in Meghe Dhaka, he speaks about that side of city, but the way Meghe Dhaka projects Kolkata, it does not look like Kolkata. In
Subarnarekha, I think we have to log back in with the same link, because this will
go off on its own, and this will go off on its own, and we come back with the same link.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So I think, this aspect of Ghatak, who projects city that does not look like city, that does not match with our idea of city. So he is constructing, as I was saying, that, it was a different kind of urbanity that he was trying to construct while critiquing, certain positions, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else?
Shall I come in, Nikhila?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, some of the things I wanted to say, like about the Oedipal element, which is very strong in the narrative, I think has already been discussed. But one of the most interesting characters for me was Horidash. And, he as the wandering figure wearing that disguise, and especially as I was hearing Parichay give the introduction, I think in a way he would also be a loosely autobiographical figure. If you look at Shibram Chakravarti's own life as a victim of partition and so on. And Horidash, like he is, it's almost as if in the end of the film, towards the end of the film, before Kanchan leaves for, he goes back home from the city, he gives up his disguise and hands it over to the little boy, as if, he is like handing over a tradition, like of rootlessness. And he also says that this is a boy who will not, whom you cannot really fix to one place. He is the kind who will be always moving, always wandering. So this is something I thought about this character, Horidash.
Yeah. Can I respond to that?
Yeah,
Yes,
sure.
please, please.
Thanks, madam, for pointing that out. Actually, yeah, Bari Thekey Paliye has autobiographical, very strong autobiographical elements. And kind of Shivaram Chakravarti followed that up with a sequel called Bari Thekey Paliye Por, if I'm not mistaken, after I ran away, something could be roughly translated. And so the Horidash figure, played by Kali Banerjee, it is also prevalent in other Bengali popular films. I mean, that Horidash figure who sells snacks and attracts young kids and kind of sings funny songs. It can be located in other Bengali popular films. But as I said, Ghatak used to pick up elements from the popular and used to give them a new lease of life. Here too, Horidash is definitely autobiographical, but even more than that, Horidash, um, apart from working as a kind of commentator on whatever happens in the film, and definitely he of course he accompanies the protagonist Kanchan, but Haridash also refers to, as I pointed out, some of the kind of Ghatak's, some of his obsessions and his um, kind of concerns in film after film. So there's this idea of displacement, not only in terms of the political partition, but more. So as I hinted at in my introduction, when I referred to the partition trilogy as the so-called partition trilogy, because my point is this, and I have a specific argument regarding this, that Ghatak's engagement with the partition goes beyond the partition, to be honest, because his films are not topical. If they were, they wouldn't have been successful. They wouldn't have been received well in other locations. So there are many European, especially French critics who wrote extensively on Ghatak's films without any experience of the South Asian partition. Obviously, it was a cataclysmic experience for Ghatak, and he tried to explore it film after film. And we can find that very clearly, explicitly in the character of Haridas. He talks about narrates his displacement and the loss of his mother. As I mentioned, this founding your mother once again and finding your lost mother and recognizing her. It's a common trait which comes back in Subarnarekha. But more than that, Ghatak is concerned with uh, the post-war modernity all over the world, and he keeps on exploring it. So in 1960, for instance, and film studies scholars will be interested to know this, uh, uh, Siegfried Kracauer, the very well-known realist film theorist, who was Bergeon's contemporary, Andre Bergeon's contemporary, and Kracauer is better known for the book From Caligari to Hitler and another book, Theory of Film, A Redemption of Physical Reality. So that Theory of Film book was reviewed by Ghatak in 1960, 2 years before he made Subarnarekha. And there he engaged with this idea of the post-war European modernity and what is happening to it. Back in 1960, when Ghatak reviewed the book, he said that there shouldn't be a widespread gloom. There shouldn't be so much pessimism over post-war European modernity because we have the Soviet, we have the space mission, we have the scientific innovations and achievements of the humankind, and several other stuff to be optimistic about. That's what he wrote in that review. But 2 years later, in 1962, he made Subarnarekha, and there's a very, enigmatic sequence where the mad protagonist is informed about the space mission of the Soviets, Yuri Gagarin and his space mission in the newspaper, in the daily, and he throws it into the furnace, and the daily with Gagarin's achievements gets burnt over the screen. So Ghatak was gradually losing interest in that kind of linear mode of looking at human progress and scientific innovations. And throughout his career, keeping partition in the background as a cataclysmic experience, he tried to explore this. What happened to the capitalist industrial modernity? And much later, when German scholars like Miriam Hansen, wrote on Kracauer and other theorists, we can see that even the Ghatak critic Siegfried Kracauer, their concerns were very similar. Even though they were separated, they were in very different locations, but their mode of engagement with the post-war situation in the world, post-Second World War situation, and in the turbulent 1960s, concerns were very similar. So Bari Thekey Paliye gives us some hints about it. And Haridas' character being one of the most prominent examples of this in terms of his rhetoric of displacement and this recognition of the dying mother. So that particular mob lynching sequence haunts me when I connect it with the dying mother in Subarnarekha.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, can you guys?
Yeah,
Hi.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. So I have two questions. One is about the book. I was just curious to know whether the book mentions. I'm sorry if I missed this part, but whether the book mentions about the child being the protagonist,
Yeah, it
and
does.
okay, does it happen in the similar way? The structure, the story about a small kid going into the city, is that the way how it
Yeah,
runs?
structurally very similar, even though the novel has some other events that got omitted in the film. But it's
Okay, so
structurally entirely similar.
all right. So I was, for me, how I look at the Kanchan's character is rather I don't know if you ever mentioned this, but he sees, I look at him as a significance of a country, like a country which looks up to the British or modernity and things like that. And no matter how much, and we don't see Kolkata as a city which has developed or whatever, and the characters like Haridas and the lonely mother and everything. Are we discussing this? I'm sorry if I missed some parts.
Can you rephrase that? So I can I understand what you were saying. I mean, you were talking about this the underdeveloped, the underbelly of the city that is there, and whether, but it has just been discussed. So Professor Nikhila was talking about this. I mean, she raised this particular point that
Okay.
this is not the way we see Calcutta on screen. And at the
Oh,
end of the film, when the boy comes back and his mother asks him about the popular monuments, whether he has seen them in Calcutta, the zoo, the Kalihat temple, and other stuff. As you can see, he has seen nothing. It's a completely different city that he has witnessed.
oh yeah.
So it's not about this that the developmentalist model. I shouldn't use the term developmentalist. The touristic way of looking at a city, that is definitely not there. As you can
Yeah.
find in countless popular films, Bombay films, when they engage with Calcutta, they always come up with specific locations, right?
Right.
Locations as signifiers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here, as Professor Nikhila rightly pointed out, except for the Howrah Bridge, no other Calcutta specific signifier can be located.
Yeah, I agree that what I was trying to put is that do we see this this boy character as when through his eyes when he look at the city as something which like a country which has been left by you know by British or whatever as that you know what, what I'm trying to say is that
I understand. I understand. Yes. Yeah. It has definitely been there because Ghatok has always been concerned with this post-independence betrayal.
yeah,
He regarded the partition as as a historical mode of betrayal, betraying the
right,
people and causing devastation.
yeah,
So here this sense prevails very much. This underbelly of the city, underbelly of modernity, to be more specific,
hmm,
uh, it definitely stands for the post-independence betrayal that Ghatak is concerned with. So because it's definitely not the colonial city that we kind of fantasize about, except for a few sequences. So,
correct,
for
yeah,
instance, the song, whether that wandering minstrel, the baul, as he sings, after a lot of wanderings, I have been to Calcutta, and I'm awestruck at it. And there are certain sequences where you can see the trams and the palatial buildings from the colonial times. But these are more like, as I said, coming straight out of perhaps city symphony films where you have a monochromatic documentation of the city in parts. But that's
hmm,
it. Then it departs from that mode
right,
and
right,
permanently so, right?
yeah, yeah,
So as you tried to point it out that this uh, a colonial city developed by the British and then the left and then the post-independence events, and think of this political rally that is there, which early in the film, Kanchan experiences, he and Haridas both, right?
right,
And on
yeah,
the streets, and this communist rally is passing by. That there's sloganeering, and Kanchan joins in, and he's
correct,
saying that it feels good when you kind of participate in something with so many people around.
yeah,
You'll find such events, as political events, uh, more in his later films, mostly in in Komal Gandhar, for instance, this,
hmm,
E flat, known in its alternative English title. There you have a lot of political events, rallies, um, movements of school teachers against the incumbent government, several other rallies, things that characterize the 1960s Calcutta. Here you
hmm,
have, as I said, indications.
right. Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes, certainly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone wants to come in at this point? Otherwise, we'll ask Dr. Shangita to discuss, I mean, to talk a little bit about her experience of subtitling the film. We are very fortunate to have her with us. So probably she'll share with us her excitement and the labor of subtitling this film and making it available for all of us. We wouldn't be watching this film and discussing it intelligibly if not for the subtitles, Shangita.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it was like I started subtitling Ghatok's films when actually it started as a labor of love, you might say, because I was planning to do this retrospective, and most of the, available subtitles are so horrible. Parichay will be able to confirm that. So there are spelling errors, and half of the dialogue. Ghatok's films are very dialogue based mostly. So and they need to be some parts of Ghatok's dialogues. They are so enmeshed in Bengali culture, Bengali tradition, and Bengali folk tales, that it is almost difficult. I mean, it's impossible to translate it in English. But yeah, that was one of the huge challenge that I faced, how to put that in that language. Bari Thekey Paliye did not give me that much of difficulty, but I found it really difficult to subtitle Subarno Rekha, because it is full of Upanishadic references. Not only not only I had to translate the slokas, but I also had to translate certain references when they were talking amongst themselves. So that was very difficult. And obviously there are certain things I had to actually paraphrase, because you cannot have too many words in subtitles. So yeah, like that. But I fortunately read Shibram Chakraborty's novel that Parichay refers to. I also read the sequel, so I was familiar with the main text as well as this. So that also made certain sense while I was translating, things for subtitles. It was really amazing. And obviously, when you subtitle a film, you go through the film again and again and again, because I was trying to fit the dialogues in that exact frame so that it does not go beyond the dialogue and all of it. So yeah, it was a very different kind of engagement, and an excellent learning curve, I would say, because when I first watched Bari Thekey Paliye, I was very young actually. I watched Bari Thekey Paliye maybe around 80s in 35 and in organized by Chandannagar Film Society. That was my hometown. So, but I didn't remember much. I remembered it as a children's film. I did not remember much. And later on, when I was also watching a film as an audience, not as a researcher, then also we tend to overlook things. But when I subtitled, it was almost like it's a part of the meaning making of the film. And yeah, it was a fantastic learning experience. Yes.
Yeah, thanks so much, Shongita, for that view of the film.
I would be interested. I would actually, I have other films of Ghatok also. And if you are interested, we transfer you, and please keep it within this group. Let this not because of the copyrights issues, So I could actually share with you the other films like Megadhakatara, all of you have, and it also has Criterion. So it's kind of redundant, my subtitle or something. But I could share with you Komal Gandhar and Subarno Rekha. If you are interested, then we transfer these two films along with subtitles. That would be fine, no problem.
Oh, great, that would be wonderful. Thanks so much. That's very, very generous of you.
No.
Anyone else? Would anyone want to come in at this point? Kavya, Usha ma'am, Tarakesh?
Actually, I think it's Nikhila, it's Professor Murli who wants to speak.
Oh,
I'm
really?
passing on to
No. Hi, Dr. Nikhila. This is Professor Murli.
Yeah. Please go ahead, sir.
It's wonderful to sit back and see any film by Ritwik Ghatak, because when we were young in the 70s, we had our own film society, and guess what the name was? Subarnarega Film and Theatre Society. So the influence that these sort of films had on us in the 70s was tremendous. And to watch this film once again is to go back to a kind of dream world. This is a kind of return to the epic mold. And thank you for the invite, and thank you for getting this group together to discuss this at this length. I don't know whether we can theorize it in that way, but this film has a fabulous way of connecting the country or the village with the city. I don't think you should make a distinction between the city and the village in the film, because wherever the boy goes, he takes the village with him, and when he comes back, he brings the city with him. And you can see that this whole metaphor of the mask is that which actually connects and reveals and illustrates this at that time. So a tremendous way of epic metamorphosis and bringing together of two separate worlds of village and city, which are not actually demarcated. This is the kind of magical touch of Ritwik Hatak, and this is a kind of reliving of the past for people like me who grew up in the great epical, or what do you call it, the realist films, neo-realist films of Rai and Ghatak. So thank you, Nikhila, and the group for bringing together. And one more word about the translator, I mean the subtitling. Thank you so much for bringing the subtitles. It was really good, because we could read, although I was frightened, because I wanted to have the magical experience of the black and white, touch. But I thought maybe I'll be misled and I'll be concentrating on reading and looking for the words and trying to connect the visuals with the words. But that didn't happen. There's a tremendous poetry in these screens and the words you have used. So thank you very much for this experience. Thank you all. And okay.
Thank you very much. You're very kind.
Yeah. Shangita or Parichay, one of you would like to say anything? Respond to.
Already said a lot.
Yeah, no, anything to respond to Professor Murli? He's in a mode of nostalgia at the moment.
And I like that. I mean, as I work on the 1960s and the 1970s, on the so-called Indian New Wave and the Film Society movement, and reading on them, I mean, it's really nice to hear about those days from a Film Society activist. So thanks very much, sir, for that.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask something?
Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah, please go ahead.
So, Shangita, I didn't need your subtitles, but I think I should see it again just for the subtitles. Unfortunately, I didn't actually need them, but I'm going to see it again for the subtitles this time. But yeah, no, actually, I just wanted to ask, what is your sense of, how do you understand the relationship that Kanchan has with other children in these two locations? In the village as well as in the city. I was reminded in the scene in the marriage, at the marriage, with the other children. I was really reminded of Visika's Bicycle Thieves and that scene in the restaurant. And I was wondering whether you also saw it that way. I mean, it's so neorealist, the film is. It's just, it really brings back Italian neorealism to you somehow. It did to me when I saw it. I saw it for the first time. But what is your relationship? I mean, how do you understand this? I mean, the relationship that he has with children in the city, various kinds of children, he's interacting with, as well as and are they, would you see them as kind of tropes for the nation coming into being kind of thing, I mean, these different kinds of children. I mean, how would you read that relationship?
I mean, for me, it definitely reminded me of Bicycle Thief to some extent, not entirely, of course, because the father, that son, what the relationship that son shared in Bicycle Thieves is not present here, right? But at the same time, it's like in terms of an entity, like there are certain similarities, obviously, like the sense of being lost in a city, and then obviously feeling marginalized and all of it. That is true, but at the same time, Kanchan is not like that boy. I forgot that boy's name. Kanchan is
Bruno.
Bruno. Yeah. Kanchan is not like Bruno because Kanchan comes from a different background, class background also. So in that sense, it is not there. So I think Kanchan is always occupying the position of an outsider when he is placed in the city, right? But he is also kind of an outsider in the village because he is the rebel figure. He does not conform to any of the kind of expectations from a child, that like he is not obedient. He is almost like Marzi ka Malik, so that way is very different. And I see a lot of Ghatak in that boy, because Ghatak himself also ran away from home, right? So, and he went away, and then he did all kinds of things. And when I interviewed Ghatak's twin sister Pratiti Devi last year in Bangladesh, I heard lots of stories. Ghatak was really a very naughty child. So I see a lot of Ghatak in that Kanchan, but probably because I heard a lot of stories about Ghatak from his relatives, or other people that knew Ghatak. So maybe that, I don't know. But when I watched Bari Thekey Paliye, I saw a lot of Ghatak in Kanchan. Yeah. Parichay. Yeah.
I think there are questions for you. So Dr. Usha wants the subtitles of Subarna Rekha. Sangeeta ji, you have already promised that to the group, Subarna Rekha and Komal Gandhar.
Yeah, I will send you the restored versions of the films, and as well as the subtitles. Okay, and I will send it to I will copy it to Geeta and Nikhila, and if you could kindly post it on the Google Drive. My Google Drive is full. That is why I cannot send it. Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll transfer. I'll retransfer, and then please feel free to share with whoever wants it. Yeah, Ghatak belongs to everybody, but copyrights things, and I don't know who will pop their head and kind of. But yeah, it's nice to share. And I'm now working on subtitling Jukti Tokko Goppo. Once it is done, it's taking very long, but once it is done, I'll share that with you as well. Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, subtitling Jukti Tokko must be a humongous task. It's such a discursive film.
Goodness.
So many dialogues.
The same difficulty that I had with Subarna Rekha, same difficulty. But because there are, extensive debates going on, and references need to be there, otherwise it won't make sense. So I'm finding ways of clubbing the sentences together and tightening it. I almost finished translating the dialogues, but I will have to now sit and place it, and then it will take some more time, but subsequently I'll be there, I think. Yeah, and I'll share that with everybody. Yeah.
Okay. Someone who has not spoken so far, Paniraj sir, Tarakeshwar, would you like to come in? Vipin is also there. Yeah. Yeah, please go ahead, Tarakeshwar.
Okay. For me, the film is a take on both family and the city. So in terms of the structure, the plot begins from the family and comes back to the family. So what happens in the middle is travel to the city and what he sees in the city. So it's something like Garbar, if I have to use the trope, and again, the Haridas character is also like Kabuliwala. So, and the mother figure who comes in the city, who is finally attacked by the mob, it also reminds me of that Kabuliwala figure. So whatever it is, so the structurally it is talking about the family and its structure, and then in terms of the content, it is also using this plot structure to talk about the city from the perspective of the boy, but actually looking at the uh, the characters on the street, not the Badrulok characters, but the non-Badrulok characters in the city. So it at one level it is a take on the city from a post-colonial city. So the underbelly, what others were saying, the underbelly of the city. But interestingly, when there is a critique of the city through the eyes of the boy, but in terms of the family, it is the city family which comes out as a model. So the family back at home also becomes like a family which he sees in the city. The only family that he sees in the city, the Badrulok family. So in that sense, yes, I agree with Parichay that it is not a nativist. Because if it is a nativist, then we have to see only uh, the plot. So leaving the village and coming back to the village. But there is also a take on the family which problematizes this going back to root kind of thing. And also the boy, though he goes back to village, it is not only because he is disenchanted with the Calcutta or the Eldorado, but also for the mother. So it is not only a disenchantment which pushes him back to the uh, village, but also the mother who pulls him back to the village. But even when he was in the city, at the end, he is looking at the ship and where it is going to Japan. So this again is trying to look beyond the immediate, going somewhere else. So the search is still on, but the mother is pulling him back. So in that sense, there is a take on the city, the modernity, and also a take on the family. So the relationship that Nandini was pointing out between the kids, the relationship that he has with the kids in the village and also with the servant is slightly feudalistic. And then the same kind of treatment that he gets back in the city. So in that sense, it makes us aware of the multiple power structure that is in operation. I will stop here. I think I'm blabbering.
Yeah. Parichay, you want to respond?
Yeah, actually, Professor Tarukrishna, thanks very much for your comments. Yeah, it opens up, a lot of space for further discussion, and especially about this, mode of kind of this movement between the country and the city, and how he problematizes it, and how the boy's engagement with the country is also kind of reshaped because of his urban experiences. So, and actually, that will remain prevalent throughout Bhatak canon, not in exactly the same form, though. So, and the simplistic in the Indian popular, it would have been rather simplistic. Here, it's not. So, and several other examples can be found. But I would think that um, this the Oedipal connection that has been highlighted, and Professor Nikhila raised the issue. I briefly kind of referred to it. it is a very, that bond is very strong, that Professor Tarukishore has rightly pointed out. This is something that brings him back, even though it has been, the association has been remolded, definitely so, after the urban experience. Now, if I just want to offer some comments on it. If we take a look at the Indian New Wave in the 1970s, things that Kathak students did. First, in some films, and it differs, this country-city binary, it differs from industry to industry. For instance, C.S. Venkateswaran, the Malayali film critic, in one of his articles in Arul Gopalakrishnan, he argued that usually in Malayalam New Wave, the journey is always to the city. As it happened in Adur's debut film Swayamvaram, because the country is associated with casteism and caste violence and lack of individualism. So in other parts of the New Wave, it may happen otherwise, especially with the Naxalite ideology so prevalent in the 70s. You want to go back to the village, you want to start your guerrilla warfare from there. But in Malayalam New Wave, it was very different. So in Swayamvaram, that runaway couple, and Swayamvaram is actually modeled after Ghatak's Subharnarekha. There is striking narrative similarities. It's a kind of tribute of Adur to his teacher. Here, it begins with the runaway couple going to the city, leaving the country, where possibly they cannot unite. Even though the city is a really big bad place, and it's definitely Adur's city is also extremely violent. So, but this journey is always there. And there are other important aspects of the urban experience, which we can find in other Ghatak films. For instance, in Meghe Dhaka Tara, the Cloud Cat Star, we have the working woman, Nita, as the working woman figure, which was so prevalent in the post-partition Calcutta. Because of the partition and because of getting relocated to the urban center, the women went out of home and kind of took jobs, went into the university. It has been well documented by partition scholars. So Professor Nikhila can comment on that. She worked on the partition. So it has been there. As I said, so the way Indian cinema in the post-independence period engaged with the idea of the urban center and urban experience, it's very varied and it's very complex. So it's definitely not the linear way of moving from one place to another. There are way more interesting connections. Here in Bari Thekey Paliye, it has its own, it definitely has its own complex associations, which will be, more elaborated on in the films that follow.
Yeah.
So there's a question from Dr. Usha. Do we need to use the link again?
Yeah, we have another minute, so we can go on. Yeah, you can respond to Dr. Usha if you want. We have another minute. And once we go off, we do the same thing, that is log back in through the same link.
It would be better if you respond to that, Professor Nikhila, because you explicitly referred to the Ripple thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was something that, occurred to me immediately while I was watching the film. Particularly the sense in which the boy seems to, think of the father as someone who, in some ways, cannot fulfill or take care of the mother the way he sees himself as doing that. So, in some ways, he thinks of himself as a figure who can replace the father, be a better, or treat the mother better. So it was only in that sense I was it occurred to me that it was quite Oedipal, this kind of relationship. But probably you may think differently. What, Dr. Usha?
No,
Yeah, go ahead.
About the edible thing, I'd like to add one more
Yeah, go ahead.
thing. As I mentioned that in my introductory talk, that Moinak Biswas, in his very brief reference to Bari Thekey Paliye, when he talks about the fairy tale like structure and motifs in it, and this the runaway son coming back to the lost prince coming back, he refers to the mother as the princess in the folk tale. For the princess, the prince brings in the luxuries, and that folklore element is very much there. So this hint is there in his writing as well.
Can I say
But
something?
how would you?
Oh,
Okay.
okay, sorry. No, sorry, Dr. Usha, please go.
No, but I was just thinking of the mask that he brings back in the end. I mean, I quite saw Dr. Nikhila's point, but I was still wondering about the mask. Where would you place that in that context then? And the bag that he brings back, maybe the bag of dreams or whatever. Does anybody have anything to comment on that?
I think about that the mask and the beard, which is actually gifted to him by Horidas. I think those are similar to the way he sees the city of Kolkata. Just like he does not see any of those touristy places, like Victoria Memorial, etc., etc. He comes back also with gifts which are not the conventional gifts that one would get from a city, back to the village. So in that sense, I think these objects are also symbolic of his very different liminal experience of the city of Kolkata. And to go back to this point about the Oedipal element, I think that also came across to me as an almost obvious part of the narrative, this whole question of the Oedipal element, and especially because there is this authoritarian father, whom the son almost detests, and his sympathies lie with the mother whom he feels is being oppressed by this almost demonic father. And also in the city, he forges very special bonds with other mothers, like Minnie's mother, and also the old woman, the mother who has lost her son. So I think it is quite strong, the Oedipal element in the narrative.
Yeah, but that was very well pointed out. I thought, this element of Oedipal connection. But we must also think that we must see it from the perspective of the child, the boy. The whole film is actually from his point of view. The way he sees his father, it's not as if the father is presented per se as a kind of, a demonic figure. But see, he has so much love and affection in his heart that he is actually waiting patiently for the boy to come across when the man goes to fetch him in the end. So it's not as if the father is all demonic, because if that were so, that Minnie's father, whom he actually meets up in the city, is somebody whom he can't imagine. You mean we can actually play with the father? You mean actually a father will sing to you? So these are all the kind of, the kind of tensions that the boy, from the perspective, from the viewpoint of the boy, as it is presented in the film, it's not a filmmaker's statement. We should remember that, because I believe that in the 60s and 70s, in the great movement, as somebody had pointed out, talking about Adur and many others, even Aravindan for that matter in Malayalam, this man, I mean, Ritwik Ghatak has been a tremendous, he has cast a long shadow in the Malayalam films in the early times. And there are other films which actually echo this particular film. For instance, films by Aravindan, G. Aravindan. These are all very poetic kind of things where the mask comes back again and again. The element of the mask and how the mask is seen as a kind of, something to present and then to remove and to reveal at the same time. And these are all linked up, I think the mask, the father figure, not actually reducible and redactable to the Oedipal, but there is something which goes beyond that, because the affection that the mother has for the child and the image of the mother that the boy carries with him throughout the film, which is present, the image of the mother is present. This is what I was trying to make at the beginning itself. Boy never leaves the village, he never leaves the city, so he is moving between these two, trying to make a kind of bridge through this kind of metaphorical device of the mask and the beard and the sack of dreams that he brings back and presents to his mother. So this is fabulous, the shuttling between the river of dreams, crossing and coming back. And that is exactly the epical dimension, the epical statement, the epical dream reality that the films of the 60s and the 70s, the neorealistic Bengali as well as Malayalam films were trying to present. This is what I have to say. Thank you for making that point very clear.
And also, I think that, this, why I think Ghatak will come back to that great mother image from Meghe Tara onwards. I think it is the predecessor of that mother image, that is, he was building up.
The archetype, the great mother archetype, the archetype.
Yeah. Great mother archetype, that Jungian image. I think he was, around that time, he was reading Jung. So it will be less Oedipal. Oedipal is Freudian after all. So I think it will be more Jungian and in that archetypal regime, rather than, that kind of Oedipal reading of it. I mean, according to me. And also this mask is also, I think, adoption of a persona, that, that boy, I mean, Haridas was an entertainer, and Haridas was many more things. Haridas was also a teacher who lost his job. Haridas is several things in that, he is almost like embodiment of the loss, embodiment of the loss. He lost home as a result of partition. He lost job as a result of, 59, Khadyo Andolan was going on in Kolkata then. So people, there was almost like a famine-like situation in Bengal then. And then, he is losing out things, and people are, getting very violent. So mob lynching, that woman, Chele Dhara, and then they thought she's a kidnapper, and then, they were trying to beat her up. So in a way, the character of Haridas, I feel, crystallizes several, threads, loose threads. And he gives that kind of baton to this boy, Kanchan. It's almost like passing on the inheritance of something greater, you carry on. It's, to me, it appeared like that, it's obvious, it's my own personal reading, but I thought it was, for me, it was something like that.
Yeah, very well said. Right.
I think the character of Haridas, as he himself says in the film, is somebody who protects the people who come to Calcutta, who have no one else there. So in that sense, he says, you go now, I have to be here because I need to take care of people like you when they come back. So it's the other Calcutta which gives succor to people who don't have anything else in Calcutta. So this is the only positive thing in the Calcutta from the perspective of the boy.
Yeah, the thing is from his perspective. That is the most important thing. How it is built up. The whole narrative is what he feels, what he sees.
Anirudh sir and Kavya, both of you have not come in so far. Yeah, go ahead, sir. Go ahead, Pandiraj sir. We are not able to hear you, sir. Your mic Microphone is unmute, but we're not able to hear you.
Meanwhile, maybe I can speak.
Yeah, go ahead, Kavya.
Uh, so I was thinking something else. Like when we think about this film as a film from the point of view of a child, so I was thinking, is it possible for a child to look at Calcutta in the way Kanjan looks at Calcutta? Actually, as it's already said about children's literature, it is the adult's view of the world which is presented through children's literature, even though it is made for children. In the case of movies like this, these are not produced for children, but for wider audience. But I think the same problem lies here also. Like it's actually impossible for a child of that age to see Calcutta like this. Its underbelly, its problems, and things like that. So I was just thinking whether we can read it from that perspective. Another thing which I found interesting is that I was also thinking about this contemporary Malayalam movies, which many critics have said that it goes back to the earlier new wave cinema. It always makes this connection with Padmarajan movies and all that. But one recurring theme is that people moving to the city like Bangalore, Chennai, and other metropolis in search of an identity, individualism, which is lacking in the village. So I also, it's already discussed, but I also thought about it. But another thing I found interesting is that even though this film portrays Calcutta as not very nostalgic, as even now who whichever Bengali I see is so nostalgic about Calcutta city, but this film shows a entirely different city, but there is human kindness. Like with this little boy, whenever he is hungry, there is somebody who is there to help him and give him food. He is, even though we may feel that he is lost, he is not completely lost. In such a huge city, there is somebody who can see this advertisement and send him back to home. And everywhere there is some kind of human kindness in the middle of this kind of a chaotic city. So there's a few things which I observed. But even then, I think for somebody who is nostalgic about the Calcutta city, it shows places, the streets, the coffee houses where political discussions happen, the streets with books, the Howrah Bridge. All these were things which people from Calcutta usually talk about. And the song, which talks about Calcutta. So even when it criticizes the city and its modernity, it gives something for people who may be in love with Calcutta. So these are just few observations which I had.
Yeah, yeah. But now, the point which I try to make about seeing things from the perspective of the boy, that has been answered by this question which came out right now. Because you can see that there is nothing very profoundly evil about the city. The city is not presented as a kind of counterculture or something which is opposed to the purity and the pristinity of a village. Nothing like that. There are only good people in the city. Even in the city, even the most evil sort of people who capture him or the beggars, they are not evil or deprived in any way. Depraved kind of people. They are people who are very tender and soft hearted. The boy always gets his food. He always, things always live up to their dreams. There are marriages there are places where he can sleep, and there are people who are very tender towards him. So this is the sort of the soft ground which actually gives us a key to understand the film, taken from the perspective of the of a child. It is of course when an adult, tries to create a film for a child, automatically it is understood that it is the adult who is trying to narrate from the perspective of the child. But one can declass oneself. One can try to see things from a different perspective. When you try to narrate a tale from the point of view of a forest, you can become a forest. That's one way in which you can actually transcend yourself and go and try to see things. And Ghatak has this amazing poetic ability to make us see things even from the perspective of a stone or a block of wood or river or sky or a moving piece of grass. If that is not an ability to transcend and see things from a different perspective, then what is? This is visual poetry at its way. This black and white miracle of making us see things from the perspective of the child. So I still feel, I don't know whether I'm right in comparing this with another film. I don't know about Satyajit Ray has a musical film which Gobi Gina make Beka Bacha. I'm not sure about the title. I'm thinking about 40, 50 years ago when we had our own film festivals, and that was a musical, a classical musical film which actually talks about great political issues. How beautifully the great master filmmaker of India could actually talk about, pulling down powers and then shifting power perspectives from the point of view of two singers. So it is possible for us to see things from.
Was it
Pardon?
Diamond King or Gupi Bagha?
Gobi Gina Bega Baja or something.
Yeah.
That drummer
Gupi
and the singer.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Gupi
right?
Gain Bagha. Yeah.
Yes,
Right.
yes. So you see that the way in which the poetically how a big dictator, the statue of the dictator is pulled down finally by the people. Everybody joins, even the dictator joins in the whole fun.
That's the
So the
Hero
whole
Project.
thing became a poetic way of looking at things. Yes.
That was Hero Project.
Pardon?
Was that film that in which the statue comes down is Hero Rajar Deshe, the Diamond King, the kingdom of Diamond King. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. But again, the main protagonists are Gupi Gain Baghabain. It is the sequel of Gupi Gain Baghabain. Yeah. That's right.
So
yeah.
I'm confused about it. But my point is, just that to show the comparison that there is a point where you can actually depart and try to take a different perspective from your own, stance. And that is what I was trying to prove there. And it was taken there, the tenderness and the nicety of the city and the goodness of even the father. Finally, the boy is actually waiting for the father to turn around and look at him. And the moment he turns around, he just jumps and hugs him. So this is amazing, the ability to see things in a tender way. And that is what the filmmaker has tried to show here. Okay.
Paniraj sir?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. The point I want to make, 2 points I want to make. I don't think it's a village, it's a family. I'm not seeing a village there. And none of the films which I watched in Hrithik Ghatak films, I don't see a village, I see a family which is lost. I mean, he lost his village in partition and he never went back there. Okay, so what I can see in Thekey Paliye is a family. You don't see organic village there. You are having a father, mother, and a servant, and only other guy what you can see is a Brahmin guy. There is some kind of commentary on Chanakya and Sanskrit and Brahminism, something there, but it doesn't give us a picture of whole village. So it's getting out of the family. That's what Kannada critic D.R. Nagaraj always says. Youth has something like, when you come to adolescence, it's a patricide. Unless you commit patricide, you cannot liberate. You cannot be liberated. So a liberation comes from patricide. I mean, escaping the bonds of the father, keeping the bonds with the mother. That's where your root is, and commit a patricide, then you will be liberated. So I see a patricide there, liberation there. That's one point I want to make. Second point I want to make is Calcutta is not his limit. He wants to even go beyond Calcutta. He sees that ship there, and if it's going to Japan, he wants to also go to Japan. He wants to go to England. He wants to earn something, and he wants to see a bigger world. I mean, Calcutta is just a metaphor for what he wants to explore. He wants to explore a larger modern world and experience the larger modern world, keeping a relation with mother, that is roots in the family, by committing a patricide, go out and explore the world, and always try to come back to the roots. This kind of experimentation is always, I mean, in almost all literature in Kannada and in other languages, that committing a patricide, going out to see a larger world, Calcutta being one. So that is one thing. Second thing is the exploration is very Brechtian in the sense that wherever, whatever comes, I will face it and I will get off the hurdles. I'll jump the hurdles and I will survive. That kind of Brechtian instinct, I don't know, I mean, how that has come to Ritwik Ghatak. Only you academicians should tell me that always that Brechtian instinct is there in the film, especially with that guy. Second thing is that Calcutta is alive. I mean, what you can see about Calcutta, it's more organic than his village, what we can see. You can, Calcutta is, again, belongs to none. The city belongs to none. Everybody is outsider to the city. Haridash is outsider to the city. That Maushi wants, he wants to connect, is outsider to that city. And all people, what he meets there, all are migrants. He talks with the migrants, and one of the guy who sits in that bus stop and smells that flower, who says that I am trying to learn Banglo, is also an outsider. I mean, many people, what he encounters in the city are outsiders. None are connected with the city, organically with the city. So city is a set of, which is not home to anyone, but is a home to, I mean, is a place for all, but home to none. That kind of a thing you can see this being explored, and in a Brechtian way. And many people are alienated there, and they want to find a root in Calcutta, but they can't, which they can't. So this kind of binaries are there about a city in modern Indian literature and modern Indian culture, want to be city of our own, but which it cannot become. That you can see as a metaphor of, okay, being rooted and being liberated. This kind of dialectic is also there in many of Ghatak films and here also, but his emotion is always entrenched in partition, and where he cannot go back. Others can go back to their village, but Ghatak cannot go back to his village because it is away. I mean, it's far away and he cannot go back, and he can go back to memories of his family alone. So these are few things which I remember from other Ghatak films are posted more Brechtian way in this film. These are my observations which I wanted to make, apart from every other thing, agreeing with every other point what you people have made.
Parichay or Samgita, either of you, do you want to come in?
Parichay.
Hello. Yeah. No, I don't have specific comments as such, but that's a very interesting way of looking at this movement between the country and the city, with the city being a non-home. It's an unhomely place, to be honest, which cannot cannot generate the idea of the family. So everyone is an outsider in the city, which is very aptly pointed out. Actually, in all of Ritwik Ghatak's films, you will find families getting rather violently torn up, sit asunder. They wander around, they die, they get separated because of some historic events beyond their control. So this idea of the dysfunctional family, the family being made into a dysfunctional unit, it has always been there in Ghatak's films, perhaps most violently in Subarnarekha. Here too, I mean, this idea of the city being a transitional space, which cannot really generate a family or harbor any kind of human relation as such, full of outsiders, migrants, and it's not particularly kind to the migrants. There might be kind people around, I mean, specific examples of human kindness, but the city as a space itself is not very kind to its migrants. So that's why there's a sequence where this visibly Bihari guy, the Bihari migrant to the city, there's a sizable Bihari population in Calcutta. He says, he kind of has a conversation with Kanchon, and he says that, I mean, it's a place for a lot of you need to fight to make both ends meet here. I mean, to survive this city. So it's better if you go back. Now, this idea of a kind of rather a mere platform and a transition stage, which is not really kind to anyone, is and everyone is a migrant, everyone is an outsider. That's a very pertinent point in this context.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
And interestingly, what you can see are all of migrants who are in marginalized. I mean, there is a community of marginalized. I mean, that's where the liveliness of the city is, or what, if you say that if there is a relations and heart in the city, that is there. There, that migrants becomes a community. That can see in Bangalore also. Bangalore, any cities like Bangalore, which is full of migrants. Bangalore belongs to none except few middle class bureaucrats. It belongs to none. But there's a community of migrants that you can see in Gatak films, that it's a city of migrants. And there is a community of migrants. Even when Maushi is also a migrant in a sense. She's an emotional migrant. And that kid, Minnie, she's like Kanchan. She's also trying to find some roots in the city, but where she cannot, right? And the other guy, his father, who Minnie says is very kind, unlike Kanchan's father, but he is not also rooted. He's a babu, right? But so he's a kind of a two-dimensional character who sees city as between the migrants and the other, what is that, slums and the decent place. So when he finds that, when he asks him from where you have come, he tells that place, and that place happens to be a slum, and then he suddenly reacts to that. So the kind of bonding is there in the city, in the marginalized. That you can see it in Gatak. In every film of Gatak, you can see that. If city is alive, belongs to marginalized, and if you find heart and any communion, it's with the marginalized migrants. That's an interesting point about Calcutta or any other city what we can talk about. And interestingly, when he goes in that canteen or that hotel, there is a discussion going on about youth who have come there, seeing that Calcutta used to be this thing and this thing and this idea, and now it has not. So this kind of dialectics is always there in the city. Where is the heart of the city? Heart of the city belongs to the, say, community of the marginalized coming together. So that's where the city should be found. That kind of things is not new in Gatak. It also comes in many Mumbai films and in many Kannada films also, I suppose.
Yeah. Anyone else? Anyone else want to come in? Kavya, you made this point on the chat that in contemporary film, city can no more be so kind to a runaway child. It's hard to find such kindness in a city in a contemporary film, she says. Whereas this was possible in a film in 1959. Any thoughts on that? Anyone?
No, okay, I mean, she's right. Maybe because that kind of films, the community, what we see in Calcutta is like that. But now even also you can see in Hyderabad, you can see in Bangalore. Yeah, it's not the same kind of kind people, but there's a different kind of kind people. Each come from those marginalized. I mean, that kind of communion, that sense of community comes from the marginalized. One marginalized responds to the other, where there's a distinction between a kind of a middle class and upper middle class city and the city of the marginalized. And you can see in many Mumbai films where, okay, it's even in the violent films, one who helps the, say, who is marginalized is one like them, like this, like them. Either he's a Bihari migrant or he's a Uttar Pradesh migrant. The love comes from them. That may be a kind of different kind of violent love, but that support, that camaraderie comes from there. even in kind of a macho, I mean, what sword and knife films in Canada, you can see that that camaraderie comes from the people who are migrants come together in a city. So that kind of, that is there, support is there. That's what unique, what I'm finding in the films, cities as seen in films. I don't know, Parichay should tell me whether there's any study on cities in Indian popular films or cities in Indian films. That kind of, I mean, that's very interesting. Even in a kind of violent films like, I don't know, you know that mega hit KGF, you can see that city.
The new Kannada film, right?
Yeah. I mean, where there's a kind of when you come to city from margins, you sympathize with the margins, you are a comrade to margins, and you are the protector of the margins. I mean, this kind of portrayal is there in Indian films. Sri 420, you can see that. Sri 420 is a kind of a say that Raj Kapoor always comes back to that basti of migrants because he is outsider and they are outsiders, and real Mumbai doesn't belong to him. So I'm not
very
sure.
Pertinent, sorry to interrupt. A very pertinent example might be, Mani Ratnam's Nayakan.
Mani Ratnam's Nayakan. Yeah, Mani Ratnam's Nayakan is always there. And even in kind of a Ram Gopal Varma's films, in the first film Satya, the kind of camaraderie is from the migrants. Or you go to gangs of Vasaipur. I mean, there is kind of urbanity expressed in terms of camaraderie, comrades who are not, I mean, camaraderie between the marginalized or who is not part of the center. Center is something like bourgeois or capitalistic, which doesn't care for this marginalized, and they are organized around it. So there is a center, there is a margin, and there is a camaraderie in the margin and a kind of selfishness in the center. That kind of portrayal has become almost a trope in Indian films, and city as seen there. But okay, it may be fresh in New India, but even in Satyaj's films, in Apur Sansar, you can explore that. Or in Pratidvandi, you can explore that. Simabad is all about that. I mean, the point, what I'm trying to ask is there any research in kind of portrayal of cities in India? Because there is no integral city in India. There is no two same cities. For example, Rajiv Ravi's Malayalam film, Kamati Padam, which talks about Ernakulam. That's a very unique film when it says that a Dalit basti or colony, there is a camaraderie. That's a camaraderie of marginalized against Ernakulam's bourgeoising capitalism or bourgeoising real estate. So that kind of thing is following in Indian films. That's the point. Also, I note in this Hrithik Ghatak film.
Yeah. Anyone else? Tarakeshwar has unmuted his mic. Would you want to come in?
Yeah. Yes, it is true that whenever somebody new comes to the city, they face problems, and there are characters who offer help to them. And these characters are always from the marginal community. There's no doubt about it. Whether it is even 60s, 70s Kannada films, or even the Bollywood films, or even the recent Kannada films too, of Dunya Vijay and things like that. But whether there is a community formation, I doubt it. Yes, there is a bond between certain characters, but you also find the bad characters are also the migrants. So the community formation, I doubt it. It is individuals. The individual bond is more in such films. So especially in Bollywood, it is individual loyalties that work. Because you helped me, I take care of you. I will not touch you. I will destroy others, but I will not destroy you. That kind of bonding is there because you helped me. It works at individual level, mainly in Bollywood films. Whether it forms a community within the narrative, I doubt it. And coming back to Kavya comment, yes, we need to make a distinction between the post-independent, post-colonial cities and then the new globalized cities. So the reaction of these cinematic narratives to the post-colonial cities and then the globalized cities are two different things. I think somebody needs to work on it to tease out these differences.
Yeah. Any closing comments? Anyone? Geeta, Kavya, Paniraj, sir?
Not really, Nikhila, except for a big thank you to Parichay and Shangita and all the other participants for their input.
Okay. If that's all. Parichay, Shangita, any last comments you want to make before I formally thank you? Anything else?
No, you are doing a fantastic job, and it's always a pleasure to be here. It's fantastic, and also to see Purichai here. I haven't spoken to him for some time, so yeah. Good to see you. Yeah.
Yeah, even though we
Yeah,
met.
thanks Sangeeta and Parichay. Actually, I'm so happy to see Sangeeta after a long time.
I know.
We met in Calcutta.
Same here, Kavya.
Yeah.
I would like to thank Professor Nikhila and all others for this wonderful group and these sessions. I had no idea about it, by the way. I just went through some of the Facebook posts in the group, and as I can see, Professor Uma Bhrugubanda introduced Telugu films maybe a few weeks back. So,
Yeah, this is a weekly meeting. So every
Great.
Saturday we are meeting. We watch a film and then discuss it over the weekend. So that's how we have watched different language films and different kinds of films. Sangeeta herself introduced Fassbender's film some time ago. So we really, Ali Fear Eats the Soul. So we really enjoyed that discussion too. Just as we did enjoy the discussion today. So thank you all very much for joining the discussion today. It was very, very interesting. Thanks particularly to Parichay for asking us to watch this film. Otherwise, I don't think we would have had the opportunity to watch the film. Also, thank you for giving such a nice overview of Ghatak and both placing him in his own times as well as contemporaneizing him with various concerns of the day. It's always a pleasure listening to Parichay with all the kinds of diverse connections he makes. I think all of us have had a very good introduction to what kind of a fantastic academic he is. And we are very happy to have listened to him today. Thank you all very much, and Sangeeta particularly for bringing in all those inputs of your experience with subtitling the film. You've been probably with the film longer than any of us and watched it more closely than any of us have. And thanks all of you. Have a very good night, and hope to see you back again next Saturday with another film discussion, which we will share in the group. Thank you all.
Thank you,
thank you
everyone.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Yeah.
Okay, good night, everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.